Good day, Terry. How are you?
I'm great, CB. Good to see you.
Thank you. Looking as handsome as ever. Oops, that's not politically correct. Darn it.
We're all friends here.
Okay, so everyone, this is the Challenges of the C-Suite, brought to you by the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches. I am so glad you're here to hear us again. And this is CB Live. And today we're talking to Dr. Terry Hildebrandt, who is a PhD and MCEC, that's a Master Corporate Executive Coach with the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches, and he is an MCC with ICF. So he is an authority. And guys, I want to just tell you a secret. He knows more about certifications in the corporate executive coaching space than anybody I know. He is a walking encyclopedia. So whenever anyone has any questions about the value of an assessment, we go to Dr. Terry. So Dr. Terry, what you can talk to us about today? First, tell us about you.
Well, thanks, CB. That's a great introduction. Today, I'm going to talk about a number of things, but before we do, just a little bit about me. I've been an executive coach for 23 years and work mostly in high tech as well as healthcare and education and many other fields, but those are my big three. I live in Denver, Colorado. Been in Colorado now for 26 years. Can you believe it? And it's been an exciting ride, especially through COVID lately. My own background, I was at HP for 22 years and started as an engineer and managed a lot of different areas, and then was also an internal coach for 11 years, which was where my coaching career started. I'm also an academic. I teach and work with doctoral students on dissertations in coaching, and for a couple of years, led a coaching school as well to train new coaches.
I didn't know that part.
Absolutely. I now I'm back and doing my own practice full time. I really enjoy entrepreneurism the best. So that's my calling and what I plan to do from here on out.
Well, we're certainly fortunate to have you in the executive coaching space. And you know what? You actually said a mouthful there because for many reasons. But the reason why you're so successful and the reason why you're part of ACEC is you came to the coaching space with an incredibly strong business background. So you can go toe-to-toe with anyone in the C-suite because you've been in their shoes. And that is the definition of the coaches that are a part of ACEC.
Absolutely. I think that's a distinguishing mark of ACEC is the having strong business experience. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's just get to it, okay? So my question to you is, ready? Drum roll. Pretty poor drum roll, but whatever. What are the three greatest challenges that you see that members of the C-suite have?
It's a great question, and certainly right now there's lots, right, in managing all the change going on in the world today. And the ones I'd love to talk to you and our listeners about today are emotional self-management to deal with stress. I think everyone's under stress, probably at a higher level than maybe ever before. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is managing the political systems within organizations. Today, you can't really succeed as a leader, certainly not an executive, without political savvy. So political savvy is one of my topics that comes up with just about every one of my clients. And then the third is really developing strong teams, which includes starting with strategy. You know, strategy seems to be the thing that everyone is learning these days and trying to get better at an ongoing basis. And sometimes they don't teach you this in a regular undergraduate program. So unless you've been through an MBA, strategy is often a mystery to up and coming leaders. So that's another one of my specialty areas that I really love working with leaders on.
So, these are all fabulous. And I'm going to pick my favorite first, which is managing political systems. I've never heard of it phrased quite like that in organizations. I have to share with you, as a Black woman in corporate America, which I was for longer than I care to say, you know what? I never quite got the political savvy part. And I'm not saying this is not something Blacks can't get. What I'm saying is there was no place to go to learn this. And I came from the world of the arts as an interior designer. And so I went to Parsons School of Design before I went to B School. And, the arts are just a whole different animal. We did not act like this. Everything was out on the open. Everybody was friendly and supportive of each other. Yeah, there was some competition, don't get me wrong. But it was, let's say, friendly fire. And the corporate world certainly wasn't that. I was so not prepared. That's where I want to start. How do you get prepared? How do you learn political savvy? What does it mean in the organization? Why does it drive you crazy? All those questions, all mushed into one. So Terry.
Great question. So I did a lot of research on political savvy and how to develop it. And it really comes down to what I call the 5 steps. So I've got a model that makes this accessible and really something you can learn.
Okay.
Some people say, well, you're great politically, but how do you do it? Well, I've given my coachees that I work with a really simple formula, and I'd love to share with you those 5 steps.
Yes. Pins in hand.
But ultimately, it's starting with really good mindset about political savvy. A lot of people avoid it completely, thinking that it's dirty, or you hear the word dirty politics, and it doesn't have to be that, right? You can have clean politics, and ideally, every organization runs on clean politics, which is really about building allies ultimately. So starting with a mindset shift about politics, that it doesn't have to be a negative thing. In fact, it can be a real positive thing if it's done correctly. So I think mindset is important. And the first step then, once you have the right mindset and you're open to really seeing this in a positive light, is to understand who the key players are in any given situation. And every political situation is going to have its own unique constellation of players. And some of these you might think are obvious, and they're the people on the org chart. But there's always these other people behind the scenes that you may not know even exist. And they're the folks who have the ear of the movers and shakers in any given situation. And they're all vying, right, for their say and their influence. But trying to get a lay of the land and understand who those people are is number one. And I recommend you create a map, actually, writing their names down on a piece of paper so you can look at it in a holistic way. So once you figure out who they are, then you want to understand their interests, which is step 2. And interests are very broad. It might include their goals, business goals, personal goals, financial goals, promotional or career goals. It also might include hidden agendas, which is where people get tripped up a lot, is that they're not aware of an interest that a leader might have, and they're surprised by their behavior in a given setting. But the more you know about their interests, the better off you are. And getting to know them is critical. And if you have direct access, this means getting to know people as...
Wait, is this number 4, getting to know them?
Well, it's part of understanding their interests. So how do you get to know someone's interests, right? It is by asking them lots of questions, spending time with them, listening to them very carefully, to what they are saying and what they don't say, what makes them excited, what makes them upset, right? So you can infer, in many cases, even their hidden agendas by being very careful listeners. Also getting to know the people that know them, right? So you may not have access to certain people very often, but you might have more access to their key people. And I always say, get to know the executive admin. They know everything, right? So they can be your best friend when you are trying to understand how someone might react to a certain situation. Certainly having access to their other direct reports and influencers is also really important. But spending as much time as you can on an ongoing basis. This isn't a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process of staying on top of people's interests, which of course, as you know, change over time. People do change their mind, and this is a moving target and something that is a living system that you have to be aware of. So that's the second step, is knowing their interests. Third step is knowing who has power and who has authority. And I define authority.
Wait a second. I'm up to number 4 already on my paper. Okay, so go back to this. Number 4 is, what is it now?
So number 4 in your list is probably part of sub step of number 2, which is understanding interests, right? So I can give you all 5 really quickly. That might be helpful as an overview. So number 1 is knowing the key players. Number 2 is knowing their interests. Number 3 is who has power and authority, right? And then number 4 is looking at conflicts as well as alliances. And then 5 is developing your political strategy. So those are the high level, the big 5.
Okay, give me 5 again. Develop the political.
5 is developing your political strategy. Yeah.
Okay. You know what? I think we're going to spend this whole show talking about these 5. Okay.
Okay, we can do that.
Ask you to come back. Okay, let's take it apart now.
Excellent. So we talked quite a bit already about interests, but number 3 is even more important in my mind, is who has authority, who has power. Where authority are the folks on the org chart that have the ability to make decisions and allocate resources, approve purchase orders, employee requisitions, things of that nature. Those in power are those that influence those in authority. So you may not have the ability to make a decision, but you have power to influence those that do. And so both of these different categories of people are important. And of course, all of them are on your key players list, but it's important what each of the key players can do for you or do to you in some cases, right? So getting a clear picture of who has authority and how much, and who has power to influence those in authority is critical. And we'll come back to this in a minute when we look at number 4, which is where are the common and major conflicts, and where are the natural alliances. So conflicts and alliances, again, are number 4. So when you're looking at conflicts in any given situation, there's going to be some people who will support you, and there'll be others that will really resist you or fight you on certain things. And even though they might be friends of yours in the world outside of business, any given situation, they may or may not be supportive of your position. So it's really important to know and not assume that just because someone has been an ally in the past, they may or may not be an ally in this particular context. So being able to map out where each of the key players are and in relation to what you're trying to achieve or your particular goals that you are pushing is really important. The ultimate goal is to increase your number of allies and to reduce the number of conflicts or at least manage your resistors. So that's an important element, is to really know where they stand on any particular issue that you're trying to promote. Lastly, which is the most important piece, is developing your political strategy.
What does
So,
that mean?
so political strategy consists of how am I going to build allies and how am I going to manage any resistance that might be out there. And political strategy also includes things like timing. Is now the right time to move forward? Or should I wait on this for a while until the constellation of players shift or there's a more openness to this? As you know, timing's everything, CB, and I know you've experienced that, right? Sometimes people are ready for an initiative or some kind of a program, and maybe they're not there yet. Or maybe there's a few key people that are supportive, but not enough to be critical mass. So that's one of the questions. Is the timing right? Or should I build more support or get more allies first? And if the question is no, that it's not the right time, then you might ask yourself, who do I need to work on to be stronger allies? You also want to know the extent of the resistance in place. How much pushback am I likely to get if I move forward with this or propose this? And who's willing to stand with me to overcome that resistance? You know, do I have enough what I would call relationship capital around this issue where people will literally stand up in a meeting and say, yes, I support this initiative or this proposal. And this is similar to what you might see in political systems, right? Are they going to stand up and sign on to what you're trying to do? Or are they more just behind the scenes armchair supporters that aren't really ready to put themselves on the line? And that's where the rubber meets the road in political savvy, is how many allies do you have, and are they strong enough to overcome any objections that might exist? Also, for the objectors or the people that might be resistors, how much power do they have? And are they likely to overrule you and everybody else that might be standing with you? Or are they someone that might be convinced to move forward with what you're proposing? So understanding the extent of their power and authority is really important. And then if they are likely to resist you, how can you manage that? Are there ways to meet with them ahead of time, what I call lining up the ducks, right? Making sure that when you go into whatever forum that you're going to present this proposal, that they're not going to blindside you, right? Or they're going to be clear about where they stand, but it'll be manageable. So really important piece there. I think another key element of political savvy is, if I move forward, I might win this battle, but will I lose the war? And what I mean by that is, what's the fallout? Maybe you'll get through what you're doing, but the next time you will have no supporters because you burned some bridges, right? Or upset some people to the point that they no longer trust you. So that's a really important piece, because this is not a one-time issue, especially if you're an internal employee or even a consultant, right? You're wanting to build a long-term relationship that is going to last. So it's always looking at the bigger picture of, okay, well, what's going to be the fallout if I move forward? Or will people be excited and enthusiastic, and this will build my relationship capital? So all these questions that we're asking here go into building your political strategy.
Terry, where were you when I was a kid?
Well, I don't want to answer that question. I might get in trouble.
That's good political strategy, Terry. I love that answer. Oh my God. Have you written a book about all this?
Well, I've written a blog post, which is on my website.
Okay, it's not on the ACEC website. Thank you very much.
But we could get it on there for sure.
Okay, we really need it on there, because I want to cut it out and put it on my wall, because I'm still learning these lessons. So, okay, so how, God, where do I start? I think I want to start with, how do you manage the emotional self so that you can develop a political system. Because isn't that incredibly hard to stay focused when your mind is all upset about issues or an issue?
Absolutely. So I think a big piece of this is self-management, right? Because political battles or systems can be frustrating. They can make you angry if people show up and try and sabotage you. You can be frustrated not being able to meet your goals. You might be resentful sometimes, right? So, you might be afraid to even move forward. So all these emotions have the potential of either supporting you in actually building your political savvy, or if you're not careful, they can sabotage you. So I have a whole nother system, which again is another 5 steps. 5 steps seem to be a good way to go with these.
Okay, so what are we going to call this one? 5 steps to what?
5 steps for stress-free leadership.
Is there such an animal?
Well, if you follow these approach consistently, it will definitely reduce your stress. And I've been using it now for 3 years with my clients, and they find it revolutionary in many ways.
Give it. Because I could have used this the other day.
Absolutely. So do you have a particular, it's helpful to use a case study if you have one, or just of an emotion that is that might be coming up. So each of them go through the same 5 steps, but and it's called the tenor method. And 2 of my colleagues that I've been working with have recently written a book on this subject. So you can go deeper if people are interested. And it's also on my website, so we can refer people to that and learn more about
the on the ACEC website also. I mean, can we share?
Absolutely. We can put a blog out about this method. That would be useful, I think, for people.
This is great. I'm telling you that I really needed this week. And it is only Wednesday.
Right. I can imagine, right? We all have things in our lives. It happened to me this morning, actually.
Yeah, I remember you told me. I mean, this leadership thing, seriously, sometimes I want to just say it sucks. Because it was so much easier just to stay in your own cocoon, right?
Right. Dealing with people is messy, right?
Ooh, you said a mouthful. Oh, Lord. Okay. Go for it. Yes.
So let's use an example of frustration, which I think is pretty common. And let's imagine someone. I think
use sabotage as one that's really common.
Yeah, that's another one too. Absolutely.
Let's go with sabotage first.
So let's imagine you're trying to get something approved through maybe your board of directors or your senior leadership team, and out of the blue, right when you're about ready to present this proposal that you've been working on for months, someone out of left field brings up an issue that they feel is a showstopper. So what's your immediate reaction that often will come up?
Why the hell are you waiting to now to bring this up?
Right, absolutely. And we may be very frustrated by that, right? So frustration is always tied to, and this is one of the breakthrough ideas, it's always tied to not being on track to achieve a goal. So in this case, our goal was to get this proposal successfully adopted, right? With as least amount of drama as possible. So now this situation has created some potential roadblocks, right, to achieve that goal. So then the first step is known as the T step, which is release tension. So you're probably going to have either tightness of chest, or maybe your head will hurt, or you're now exasperated in some way. Your heart rate may be up, and So to release tension is
How about all of the above, Terry?
right. So some deep breathing is one technique, and that has been proven physiologically to calm down some of these things. So that's a really first step, is to take some deep breaths. You might want to walk around the building. You might want to, even if you have more time, go to the gym and, blow off some steam, whatever it takes to get your body to release some of that tension. Then your brain can think clearly about this without being overwhelmed by all those transmitters and the neurotransmitters that causes frustration, like cortisol and adrenaline, that kind of ramp us up. So now we're going to be calmed down a little bit to think clearly, which is the E step, which is name the emotion. So we've already realized that the name of the emotion here is frustration, maybe a little anger, maybe even a little fear. But we pick one of those and name it and say, well, in this case, let's assume frustration is the major emotion. And by naming the emotion, we're actually acknowledging that we're feeling something important. And that emotion can lead us to some greater insight and wisdom to what's really going on here. So if we're frustrated, then that means we're not on track to achieve a goal, which is the underlying need, which is to achieve a goal and specifically have this proposal go through smoothly. The O step in tenor is to be able to come up with some new options. And we have a number of knobs we can turn. The first is revisit our assumptions. And one of our assumptions might be that either this is a huge problem or maybe it's not a big problem. Our immediate reaction might be, oh, this is huge. We might want to do a reality check and ask ourselves, okay, is this really going to derail my process, or is this a red herring that's just out there to distract me and throw me off my game, right? or if it is just a distraction, maybe we ignore it or address it in the presentation, but not make a big deal of it. If it is a big deal, then we ask ourselves, okay, well, how do we create some path forward to address it? Maybe we want to quickly do some analysis. We might put together a team to work overnight to come up with some workarounds. We might even postpone the meeting if possible to give us more time. So we begin to think strategically about how do we deal with this new issue that's been brought forward. After we come up with some possibilities that are going to really work, we check against our criteria to say, is this good enough or not? Have we met come up with a solution that will cause us to not be frustrated anymore? Because once the frustration begins to lift, it means that we've done our work, right? We've addressed the issue, which is the last phase, the R. The R is the gut check, our resolution. So we ask ourselves, how do I feel about this right now? And you listen to your body. Do you still have tension? Do you still have any other emotion that's creating some uncomfortableness to you? If that has dissipated, it's very likely that we have addressed this issue.
Terry, can you do really all of this in the heat of a moment? I'm like, give me the plate so I can throw it.
Right. Well, that's the release tension. You might need to throw a plate.
Oh, okay. Let me share that with my husband then. Okay.
You can buy some cheap ones at Costco, right?
Oh, okay. Don't aim for the head. Aim across the room.
Maybe some paper plates.
Paper plates. Okay. That might work better.
But yeah, that is the first step, though, is to release a little bit of that tension so you can think straight, right? You ever heard that phrase, I was so angry I couldn't see straight, think straight?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But that's part of the process, right? And we want to acknowledge that.
I think he uses that trick on me because he'll do something to make me just crack up. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm supposed to be mad at you. Speaking of,
that's a great technique when you're working with others, which you can use tenor to help other people manage their emotions, like your employees or your boss or your spouse.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Well, I've got all these written down, so I've got to now type them up so that I can put them on the wall. Okay, so now we've got the steps to solving, let me say, backstabbers or self-sabotage, or, whatever you want to think of. And then, so let's move into the third area. Well, it doesn't even seem to work after all of this intense conversation, but developing strong teams.
Well, they can go together, right?
Yeah, they could.
The teams, there's many things that are needed to have a strong team, but one is to be able to have and support each other in dealing with emotional issues, right? So training a team in tenor and in stress management can really be effective, as well as political savvy. Because if political savvy is done well within a team, then you're always building allies and being open about where people stand and how to build a strategy that's going to help the team reach its goals, both internally with each other and then externally with their key stakeholders. So I think part of team development includes political strategy as a team level, as well as emotional management within the group. I mean, the groups that really suffer, one of the biggest issues is trust, right? And trust is undermined, right, when you have bad politics and poor stress management and low emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So, okay, tell me more, because what I see, I guess it's the same thing. What I see that's destructive in teams is, I guess I shouldn't say it's destructive, but I am, for lack of a better term, groupthink. You have one leader that influences everybody, and all of a sudden, all the minds that you brought together that you thought had inner strength and could give you good direction and dialogue, they're all thinking alike, and that one leader may have an unconscious bias, may have a hidden agenda, and so now the whole team dissipates.
Yeah, or I worked with one group years ago. I call them the head bobbers, because whatever the top guy would say, everyone else would sit there and do this.
Yeah, I'm going to go like this now. So
and I knew them well enough where I implemented some strategies and processes to help them prevent that.
Oh, what did you do?
And so one of the things we did is I talked to the senior leader, and I said, when you are a very charismatic guy, and people do like to follow you, but and you're very persuasive, and maybe he didn't, he probably used this to his advantage, but in this case, it was hurting him, because he would be the first guy to share his opinion about a strategic situation or a major business decision. And I told him, don't be the first guy to speak. Wait and don't share your opinion, because you're biasing the group, right? You're creating a situation where they don't feel comfortable sharing their ideas because they don't want to disagree with you, right? So that was one thing, and I would often facilitate these meetings and ask others. And I would even say, we're going to go around the room, and we'll end with the general manager today, but we want to hear from everyone. Or we would even do more structured ways of getting ideas on the table by having people writing their ideas on Post-it notes, and then I would read each note, or have people share one note at a time and go around the circle, and we'd put them up on the wall. And it gave us a way to understand how much support there was for an idea. Because if 5 people said the same thing, obviously that was an important idea to the group. where normally we may not have gotten that level of understanding of where people stood if we went with the typical MO, which was the senior leader starting with the conversation. We also developed what was called the 5-finger method. And the 5-finger method is a way of polling where 1 means I'll sabotage it. I'm not agreed at all with this proposal. 2 is I'll likely resist it. 3 is I'll go along with the crowd, but it's not my way of doing it. 4 is I'm highly supportive, but have a few minor tweaks to it. And then 5 is I am all in, right? And I would, we would often have a discussion, and I would put on the table the proposal and read it out loud and have people show their level of support. And if anyone was a 1 or a 2, we would ask them to share what their concerns were. And the ground rule is that if you don't do it now, you can't do it in the hallway later. Right?
I love it. Okay, give us that again. So I've got 1, sabotage.
Right. 2 is
likely resist.
Likely resist. 3 is okay with it, but not my approach.
Okay, but not my approach.
Right. I'll go along with the crowd, but not my favorite approach. 4 would be supportive, but have a few minor concerns. And then 5 is all in.
I love it. I love it. So, Terry, you mentioned something that's very popular. I don't know whether it's because I'm now in a leadership role that I am having some serious doubts about it, but I understand the basic underlining methodology and rationale to it. But, it seems like it flies in the way of cowardice leadership or not courageous leadership. And that's this method of wanting to take the pulse of people in the company or in a group or an organization absent the leader. Because I believe that it leads to groupthink and not as much clarity and honesty as it's proposed to be.
Right. I think the belief there is the leader will maybe
contaminate.
Or shut down conversation, or maybe disagree, and people will be fearful. I think that's a symptom of a bigger issue when people say that, which is a lack of trust in the organization. Instead of being able to have an open dialogue with the leader, it is showing that something else is not working. Either the hierarchy is too strong, or the leader's not listening, or the employees lack courage.
Or is it symptomatic of the group that's proposing this? In other words, could the rest of the team be okay? And you've got this group that wants to, I'm using the hand motions because it's more expressive than what I want to say.
I think I know what you're meaning, though. It's also potentially a method of control to control the communication.
Yes.
And I think, again, that usually goes back to not trusting that the leader will listen, or not believing they'll listen, or that they want to bypass leadership in some way. It could be a power play potentially as well. And I think there may be places for that, but you can do that in a lot of different ways that don't remove the leader from the equation, but can inform the leader in a more powerful way, like something as simple as the Post-it note exercise, or in the virtual world today, it's posting things in the chat room, right, or Q&A, and that can help people see what the ideas are. One of my favorite things I used to do when it was what I would call a high-risk situation is to do what's called the Delphi method. And the Delphi method is is a way of making a decision and gaining consensus within a group. In fact, they use it for the Academy Awards every year. So it's usually done in rounds, where the first round of input is a series of questions. Can be one question, but might be a longer set. And those questions are answered by all the stakeholders, including the leader. The leader wouldn't be included in it, but no one knows who said what yet in round one. But whoever is facilitating, and you can do this on automated surveys as well, but you can do it via email, whatever system you want to use. I used to, as the facilitator, would mostly do it on email and compile everyone's results in a way that was readable. And then I'd send it out again for a second round. So then everyone has seen all the input and they can comment on it and add additional thoughts, and in a brainstorming way. And then if there was still a need for a third round, you could even do a third round. But most of the time, the second round was enough. And then I would bring all that data back to the group as a whole, including the leader. And then we would deal with whatever showed up. So it could be a powerful way to get ideas on the table really fast without even having a meeting, right? So it's time efficient. And it also enables everyone to have a voice so that you don't get groupthink, right? It encourages divergent thinking. So everyone has a chance to hear what has to be said, including the leader's inputs as well. I did work with one group that took a whole year trying to come to consensus on an issue. And it was clear to me they weren't really listening to each other. This wasn't a leader issue, it was a group issue. And what I did is did the Delphi, and in 2 meetings, they resolved the entire issue by using this Delphi method. Because everything was there in black and white, everyone's voice was heard, and then the answer became really clear to them as a group.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess the reason why I am still debating this absenteeism of the leader is not only because of groupthink, but I also think that there's some validity in it. I know that I listened to a tape of Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, who interviewed, I don't remember who it was, whether it was Alan Mullally or somebody else, and he said, what was the greatest thing that you've learned in coaching? And the response was that whatever I say when I'm near my employees becomes the golden rule. And sometimes I just want to hear them think. And so I've become more and more, personally, I've become more and more cognizant of listening. But I think there is, and I'm having this argument back and forth with myself, there is the ability to go to a meeting and zip it, right? And you get such wealth of information back by just listening versus not going to a meeting and having the results handed to you by a group of people. I think you're missing the fineness of the conversation. I could see lots of opportunities for disruptive think to come through. Yeah.
Well, because obviously, depending on how the meeting results are communicated back, you're likely to miss important details and the nuance of what was said. And if it's in a written format, it's hard to communicate the tone as well. So certainly there's a lot that might get lost in translation between when you're not present. I would agree with that.
Yeah, so I think I'm coming down to the point where perhaps it is as simple as this, training a leader not to say anything. Because it is incredibly hard. I started doing that in a couple of meetings, and I literally have been sitting there like, don't say a thing, but keep a smile. Don't say a thing. because I know that I'm learning a lot by not speaking. But you want to jump in and you want to give an answer because you know you have the answers to the questions. But in knowing that you know the answers to the questions, sometimes the answers are for the wrong question.
Really interesting point.
You know?
Absolutely.
So I graduated from the New School of Social Research, and I have an expression that what I learned as a graduate student graduating from there was that the answer is the beginning of the question.
Mm.
And I have started to work on myself to engage in that, which is to really just listen as much as you want to say that's wrong or that's right, even stronger, that's right. Because I think it's easier to say it's wrong than it is to say it's right, because it's right requires more listening.
Right.
And more processing. Because in there's a nugget of information that's agreeing with you, but there's also a nugget of learning.
Because, you never know what might come up that you can still go deeper on any particular issue. And being able to hear more before you believe you've got what you need might be that one key that opens up the next step.
Absolutely. And I have found that out quite a few times since I've learned to be quiet. But I wonder how, I don't have an answer, how do people in the meeting feel, and maybe you have an answer, with the leader, the C-suite, sitting there and not saying anything? How do they feel? Are they comfortable?
I think it depends on the ground rules of the meeting and also the intention of the meeting. So being able to be clear about that. Hey, I'm here to listen for this meeting, or maybe having someone else facilitate it where they aren't looking to the leader to drive it themselves. Or, the leader can develop a new rule, like I did with the one team, that they always go last, right? And maybe what they say at the end is a summary of what they've heard.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. So that everybody feels like that they're heard.
Right. Exactly. So they may still say something, but it's acknowledging, the group's inputs. So I think part of it is about the culture of the team and how the meeting is set up. What's the role of the leader in this particular meeting, and how we're going to do that.
I love that, Terry. I think that's actually the key answer, which is to say, now, I think some people, I don't believe that I have this, is that they're afraid to hear the other people speak because they feel that it means that they're no longer respected, or they're seen as not being the leader anymore.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with leaders that have those issues?
That are fearful if they don't stay in control that they'll lose power, or I think again, there's a lot of ways to maintain authority and also power, and listening is one of them.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of non-intuitive, but quite powerful.
Hey, Terry, what do you consider, what are the three best, we're going to go in threes, not fives, because fives I didn't prepare you for, but what would you say the three most important skills within the listening skills?
Right. So number one, I believe, is to quiet your own mind. Because, many leaders are very quick thinkers. They're often strategic. They're often creative. And all that's wonderful. But in the listening mode, right, you're putting your own thoughts on hold for a minute. and allowing others to bring forward their thoughts. So I think that is quieting your own mind, those voices inside, is number one. And certainly things like meditation and practicing quietness and listening in that setting can really help there. That's a big one, right? Because we want to jump in right away with our own ideas often as leaders. There's a little trick with that too, called mind clearing. You can have a piece of paper in front of you and take a quick note, so that you don't lose your thought. But it's to clear the mind so you can go back to listening fully by capturing that quick idea on a piece of paper. And we use that a lot when we did innovation workshops as a way to keep people focused on the speaker. So that what I'd say is number one, is being able to quiet your own mind. I think number two is listening isn't just being quiet, it's also engaging the other person, which means asking questions, and also being able to use body language to indicate that you are engaged. And it might be something as simple as head nodding or eye contact, but a really short, powerful question, which is the bread and butter of coaching, right? Is really critical too for good listening. Is asking the right question, and not a question to lead the witness, but a question that is genuinely helping the other person with their thinking, like going deeper into their logic, their approach, their insight, pulling out even more of what they have to say. So the question is not for the listener, it's for the speaker, actually.
I want to dive a little bit more into that, because oftentimes people who ask questions, it sounds defensive.
Right.
Or maybe even not defensive, it sounds antagonistic. So how do you ask that question when somebody is trying to present a new concept without sounding like, what are you talking about? You know?
Well, a lot of it is attitude. I think having an attitude of curiosity is really critical there, as opposed to judgment. If you're having an attitude of judgment, it'll come across as defensive or judgmental. If you have, and you can see this in political questioning, right, on TV. More often than not, it's a battle. So the questions are intended to discredit the speaker. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about questions that actually support the speaker. So the speaker feels validated, that they feel like you're really genuinely interested in them and what they have to say, that you're really curious. So, and we can all do this, right? It's in the attitude of trying to understand. And they might be questions because you really don't understand, but the speaker will be probably happy to answer those because you're really making a big effort to connect with them. So it feels loving and supportive,
yes,
and genuine and curious, as opposed to a battle or defeatist or judgmental or critical. And we can all feel the difference, right? And we can tell by the emotional content of the question.
And I also think I want to add to that, because I think people who are strong leaders, like myself, and then you combine that with I'm an INTJ, my questions are going to sound hard and to the point. And so I've learned to say to people, I'm only asking this question to get a better understanding of the direction you're going into, or to get clarity. And I think that helps, versus somebody thinking you're being a real smart aleck and just trying to pin them against the wall.
Right. So sharing your intention can certainly do that.
Like that, sharing your intention. Okay.
Sometimes it can backfire if it's not genuine.
Really? Give me an example.
Well, when we see this more in political settings, where they're under pretense will say, and you'll see the questioner sometimes feigning their ignorance when you know they really know what they are talking about. They'll say something like, "Explain this to me like I'm a third grader."
Yeah, okay,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a good example of how that can show up. And so I think you have to be, the question has to, the motion and context has to match with what you're really trying to do, or people won't believe it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Okay, so you gave us Quiet Your Own Mind, like for medication, medication, gosh.
That might work too. But.
Yeah, what am I promoting here? Okay, I like that. And engage the other person. And what was the third one?
So I think the third one is to have presence, and presence is that more intangible feeling that you're really there with the person, that you're not checked out or thinking about something else, or an obvious way you exhibit presence is the not check email while you're in the meeting.
Okay.
How many people do that, right? They think, oh, I'll just answer this quick email. Meanwhile, someone's like sharing their deepest, passion. And now, could you say that again for me? But on a practical level, it's things like that. But on a deeper level, it's having you really feel understood as a speaker, like you actually get people. And again, eye contact is a method to do that, body language, but it's really more of an energetic state. And I know that might sound kind of ephemeral, but we all have energy fields, right, that we are projecting, and we can tell if somebody's with us or somewhere else.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I've heard that in comments about how I interview people, which is, yeah, you were definitely engaged, CB.
Right.
And it felt comfortable. It felt like a natural flow. Not to be braggadocious, but I've been on interviews with people where you're sort of spilling your guts out, and they just like, yeah, okay. Give me some emotion here. I feel like I'm alone, right?
Absolutely. That's another great example, is that emotional element of it. And really maybe even excitement,
yeah,
or at least curiosity for what the other person's saying. Yeah.
Wow, Terry, this is such great information. I hate to end, but I think that we're coming up on an hour, and I definitely would love for you to come back.
I would be happy to. It's always a pleasure.
You have such God, your head is it's just a fountain of knowledge. I know that you're very involved with coaching supervision. So when you said you were going to come on the show, I thought, no, this is not for other coaches. This is for leaders. And I thought, but I love Terry. I'm going to go with a trust factor here. I'm going to trust that he's going to say something that's appropriate for leaders of the C-suite. He's not going to talk about things that are appropriate for coaches to know. And boy, am I glad I followed my gut. You are just amazing.
Well, thank you, amazing. So are you. A great interview. I really appreciate your thoughtful questions.
Thank you. So listen, everyone who's on this call, this has been Challenges of the C-Suite, brought to you by the Association of Corporate Executive Coaches. And we've had the honor and privilege of talking to Dr. Terry. And gosh, I just can't think of a better person to have on this show. As I said, we're talking a walking encyclopedia. And for those of you that are too young to know what an encyclopedia is, a walking Wikipedia.
Well, thank you, CB, for your kind words. It's always a pleasure.
This is CB Bowman Live. Come back and join us sometime. Meantime, excellent success out there. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.